You know, for the longest time, adapting a video game for TV or movies was seen as, well, a curse. Then this one show came along that didn't just break that curse, it completely rewrote the rules for what animation and, honestly, what television could even be. Today, we're diving deep into the masterpiece that is Arcane.
So here's the question that's been bugging gamers and movie fans for decades, right? Can a video game adaptation ever really be a masterpiece? I mean, history is just littered with these creative failures and box office bombs. It was pretty much a given that the magic you feel in a game just couldn't make the jump to the screen. And then, boom, 2021, Arcane shows up.
And this number? It says it all. A perfect 100% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics for its first season. That's not just good for a video game show. That is an incredibly rare thing for any show. And it was the first big signal that something truly different had just landed.
Oh, and it didn't stop there. Arcane went on to make actual history. It became the first streaming series ever to win the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. We're talking beating out giants like The Simpsons and Rick and Morty. So this wasn't some niche award. This was the mainstream saying, okay, the quality here is just undeniable. We don't care where it came from.
So how did they do it? How did Arcane just waltz in and succeed where so many others had failed? Well, it all starts with breaking a very old, very stubborn curse. You've probably heard of this video game curse, right? It usually comes down to a pretty simple and sad formula. A big Hollywood studio buys the rights to a game, has no clue what makes it special, and then waters it down for what they think is a mass audience. The original creators, usually pushed to the side. The heart and soul of the story, totally lost.
While Arcane's developer, Riot Games, did the exact opposite. They just bypassed the whole Hollywood machine. They funded the entire thing themselves, to the tune of an estimated $90 to $100 million per season. It took them 6 years to develop, and they kept complete creative control. And that, right there, was the key. The people who actually built the world were the ones telling its story.
But look, creative freedom is only half the battle. The other half is what you actually see on the screen. And believe me, Arcane's visual style is nothing short of a revolution. This incredible look comes from a French animation studio called Fortiche Production. They developed this signature style that honestly feels like concept art that has just come to life. It's not really 2D and it's not really 3D. It's something totally new. It's like watching a living, breathing painting. So how did they pull this off? Well, the magic is all in the little details. They build characters in 3D, but then they cover them meticulously with hand-painted 2D textures. They even use real-life camera tricks like shaky cam and pulling focus, which tricks your brain into feeling like this animated world is a real physical place. The result is, every single frame could be hung up in a museum. It's gorgeous. And critics, of course, they noticed this right away. Time magazine really nailed it here. The story is amazing, for sure, but it's the transcendent animation that just launches it into the stratosphere. The visuals aren't just window dressing, they're a core part of how the story is told. But as beautiful as Arcane is to look at, its real power, its true heart, is in its story. Because this isn't just some fantasy adventure. No, this is a deeply human tragedy on an almost Shakespearean level. The show uses this whole fantasy setting to explore these incredibly mature, incredibly relevant themes. It's a story about how systemic inequality can literally create monsters and how deep personal trauma can ripple out and cause these massive, world-changing disasters. And you can see the central conflict perfectly in the two cities. You have Piltover, this gleaming utopian city of progress, all gold and white light. And then you have Zaun, the polluted, oppressed undercity, choked by these toxic green fumes sitting right underneath it. This visual of light versus dark, progress versus oppression, that's the engine that drives the entire show.
And at the heart of it all is one of the most devastating character arcs I have ever seen in television. We watch this sweet but insecure little girl named Powder just desperately trying to help her family. But her good intentions lead to this horrific accident. And in this moment of just unbearable grief, her older sister V abandons her. And that one single act of rejection just shatters Powder and allows her to be reborn as the chaotic, terrifying villain Jinx.
Okay, so you might be thinking, this all sounds amazing, but I have never, ever played League of Legends. And you know what? That is exactly where the show's genius really shines.
The creators made this absolutely crucial decision to just tell a powerful, universal story that stands on its own. You do not need to know a single thing about the game, its characters, its lore, to be completely sucked in by the drama between these sisters. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This audience review says everything. People who had never even heard of the game were calling it perfect TV. And that's the proof right there. Arcane didn't just succeed as an adaptation, it succeeded as a phenomenal piece of television, period. So, what's the ultimate impact of Arcane? What's its legacy? Well, this is a show that animators and writers are going to be studying for decades. The numbers tell a pretty interesting story here. As you can see, that first season was just a massive, undeniable hit with critics and audiences alike. For the second and final season, though, you can see there's a little bit of a dip in that audience score, dropping from 93% down to 80%. So why the dip? It pretty much came down to pacing. Now, everyone agreed the animation and the emotional punches were maybe even better in the final season, but some viewers felt that there was just so much plot being crammed in at the end that a few character stories felt a little bit rushed to the finish line. But look, despite some minor quibbles about the ending, the overall verdict is crystal clear. Arcane is a true landmark. It didn't just raise the bar for video game shows, it raised the bar for Western animation as a whole. And that's really the final takeaway. Arcane proved that a video game adaptation doesn't have to be some cheap cash-in. With real vision, real investment, and a deep respect for the source material, it can be art. It can be a masterpiece. It didn't just break the curse, it created a whole new gold standard. So it leaves us with this really exciting question for the future. Arcane showed everybody what's possible when you give talented creators the time and the freedom to do their best work. So the only question now is, who's going to be next to step up? Thanks for tuning in.